when I say the word exotic to you, what does it conjure up?
Oh, it's deeply offensive, Mike. How dare you? Because you're implying that I'm not native to the area,
Well, do
which
you
of
know
course.
people? Well, this is interesting because the reason we're talking about this, the British Small Animal Veterinary Association, which is one of those associations I wasn't aware of until today, has apparently suggested that we should not call pets exotic because it somehow demeans them. I don't know why it demeans the pets or whether it's demeaning to the places where they come from, but we're talking here about tortoises, snakes, lizards, geckos, presumably, salamanders, I don't know. I mean, people have some pretty weird pets. And the reason you call them exotic is because they're a bit unusual, not because they're from somewhere else, surely.
I would have thought exotic is exactly the right word to use, because
Yeah.
the justification that the British, what is it, the British Small Animal Veterinary Association has used is that it implies they're not native to the area. But if you're describing some lizards or many snakes or tortoises, that's probably true if they're in the UK, that they're not native to the area. I'm no expert on small animals and their veterinary requirements, but I would have imagined there are much more important things to worry about than whether the lizard is going to be offended by use of the word exotic. I love the fact that there's a group on the other side of the argument called the Plain English campaign, which is standing up for common sense on this and saying, no, it's quite confusing and very odd to be encouraging all these changes. They also want us to stop using the word pet, because that apparently is demeaning to the animals. Would you like to know what the alternative term they want us to use instead of pet?
Tell.
Non-traditional companion animal. That's what we're...
You see, this is the trouble with these bozos, right? Is every alternative that they suggest is ludicrously long and complicated to say. I mean, why would you change one 3-letter word for 4 words, 1, 2, 3, 4, which mean nothing really? Non-traditional companion animal. And what does that even mean? Non-traditional, what does that mean?
It doesn't mean anything. They're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. I thought that pet was quite a nice word. I don't think that's insulting at all.
Well, there are certain parts of Britain where you call somebody pet as a term of affection, don't you?
Well, exactly. And this new term they've come up with certainly isn't any better. I think it sounds almost insulting. If I say Mike Graham is a non-traditional radio presenter, that sounds like I'm having a go at you, doesn't it?
It doesn't sound good. I don't think I'd want you to say that about me, and I may have to take legal action now that you have. But I mean, I've also looked up, as you might expect, the definition of exotic, and in addition to it meaning from another country, it also can mean very different, strange or unusual, which is fair enough, isn't it? Because if you've got, I don't know, some kind of giant lizard in your house, that is kind of strange and unusual, and some might say not a house you would want to visit.
That is, I think, it's a very fair description of the animal. It's probably, in a lot of cases, a very fair description of the owner of the animal as well. And I imagine that's probably part of the reason why they buy something like a snake or a lizard, because you want to stand out. If you wanted to be ordinary and fit in with the crowd, you'd get a dog or a cat, wouldn't you?
And also, I can quote from you a very old film, which you may not have seen, called No Way Out, which is quite a good thriller set in Washington, D.C. with Kevin Costner and Sean Young. And at one point, he has to go off and do something abroad. And she says, you're always going off to visit these exotic ports of call. And he says, a port is a port, you're exotic. And she's American. So clearly he wasn't using the word exotic in the sense of somebody from a foreign land.
Yeah, these kinds of
busybodies. I apologise in advance for my detailed knowledge of this particular dialogue. It's just I've watched it quite a few times.
These busybodies, they don't have anything better to do they? They see problems where there aren't any. Of course, this isn't the first time that animals have been on the front line of the free speech culture wars. There was that list of animal-friendly language released by the animal rights group PETA.
Yes.
All kinds of language that we use in our everyday conversations, which we didn't realise was offending these poor creatures. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone. That's appalling. And what we should be saying instead, according to PETA, is feed 2 birds with 1 scone. That's much more inclusive and loving. And so I hope we can all
But is it safe, though? I mean, is it safe to feed birds with scones or even scones, as I would call them?
Well, exactly. They've not thought it through, have they?
They really haven't, no, because that could weigh them down and they could, in fact, plummet from the sky at a high rate and just crash into the earth. Because this is the thing. I'm not sure I want to be respectful to my pet, right? You know, why do you have to show respect to your pet? The pet basically lives with you. You provide it with food. You take it out for a walk or let it do whatever else it does if it's not a dog or a cat. And you pretty much look after it. It doesn't contribute really anything to the household by way of income unless you've got a particularly clever pet. And you go, well, you know, why can't I call it whatever I want to call it? Call it, you know, Fido.
It's a strange relationship, isn't it? Especially with, with a normal pet like a dog or a cat. A dog, certainly you take them for walks and then they come and sit on the sofa with you and watch TV with you. Whereas if you've got a lizard or a snake, I'm not sure what the protocol is there with that particular relationship. Do they just sit in the glass cage all day and you feed them a dead frozen rat every now and then. But it's not a particularly intimate or endearing relationship to the point that you're going to be talking about, let's have a conversation about what language makes you comfortable or uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought there's that much to worry about. When
my dog is a great dog, and I extract an awful lot of pleasure from hanging around with him. But I can't say I would get the same from a snake, really.
No, I can't say I would either. But I mean, it's maybe we're not the right target audience for this kind of thing. We're not the typical snake owners. Neither of us have neck tattoos.
But this is,
this
is, as you said, Jason, the broader problem, isn't it? It's people finding fault with things which nobody's annoyed about. I mean, there is no pet union that I assume has gone to these people to say, we don't like being referred to as pets. We prefer the use of the word non-traditional companion animal. And it's just bonkers, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. There's no pet lobby that's pushing for this. At least if they'd come up with some kind of traditional left-wing justification, like it harks back to colonialism or it's something to do with racism or something like that. But they haven't even done that. They haven't even produced a facade of some kind of logic behind this. I mean, they're not accusing anyone of racism for using the term exotic to describe a lizard. So what is it? Is it speciesism, exoticism? It's unclear what the core issue here is that they think has got society and the lizard-owning part of society in particular in some kind of stranglehold.
Yeah, quite. I mean, Nigel Rees was on earlier, a bloke who's worked for the BBC for 46 years and is now finally left because of a combination of things, but chiefly because of their use of diversity and language and all that. It won't be long, presumably, before the BBC sort of style police come out and say, well, you shouldn't really use the word pet anymore. Why don't you use these other words instead? And it's so inaccurate. That's what I dislike about it, because I love language. I love the accuracy of words. I love the descriptive nature of it. And to call something a non-traditional companion animal, I mean, you have no clue what that even means.
Exactly, yeah. An exotic pet is a short phrase, and we all understand exactly what it means. We know what it's referring to. It has its etymology. It has its history. We've been using it for a very long time. And so to come up with these weird formulations, it just sounds like some kind of challenge, some kind of dare to use the most syllables you can and to take the most time you can to explain the simplest concept. There's no logic to it at all. It doesn't make any sense, doesn't solve any problem. It's just a case of busybodies with nothing better to do than to campaign on these complete non-issues.
Yes. And don't you also like the way that they've now they utilise this word problematic all the time, as if that sort of somehow excuses their act because they've found this problematic, meaning they don't like it. But they don't really explain how it's problematic or in what way it will save some animal from being offended by not doing it.
Exactly, and it undermines the real issues, doesn't it? When you just slap a label like problematic on it, and then of course there's no further discussion needed because we can all accept that problematic is a problem, and so we need to do something to address it, and we need to change the status quo just for the sake of being seen to do something different to what we've always done. And so no one can question the fact that problematic means there's a problem that needs to be addressed.
Exactly.
They don't provide any further explanation, of course, of what the problem is with referring to lizards as exotic pets, which they are.
They certainly are. Well, listen, Jason, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.